The transport truck stopped with a slow metallic groan. Morning fog still covered the fences of the camp, turning everything pale and colorless. Guards moved calmly, calling instructions, helping the new arrivals step down one by one. Most of the prisoners moved like men who had learned to hide their emotions, eyes forward, faces blank. Then the last one jumped down. He almost slipped. A young German soldier, thin, shoulders narrow under a worn field jacket. His boots were too large, laces barely holding together. He quickly corrected himself, standing straight as if afraid someone would notice. The American guard checking names paused. "Age?" he asked. The young soldier hesitated before answering. 18. The guard looked again, almost expecting a joke, but the boy's face stayed serious, exhausted, pale, far too young for the uniform he wore. Inside the intake building, the air smelled of disinfectant and wet wool. The routine was simple: papers, inspection, medical check. The young prisoner followed every order carefully. No arguing, no resistance, just quiet obedience. When the camp doctor entered, he already looked tired from a long morning. He motioned toward the chair. "Sit." The examination began. Pulse, breathing, weight. The numbers made the doctor frown. Too light, too tense. The young soldier avoided eye contact, staring at the floor as questions came. How long at the front? How many weeks without rest? When was your last full meal? The answers were short. "Don't remember." "Long time." "Before retreat." Nothing dramatic, no stories, just facts spoken quietly. The doctor asked him to lift his sleeve. The room became still, not because of wounds. There were none that looked severe, but because his arm looked fragile, almost like it belonged to someone younger. One of the medics stopped writing for a moment. Outside, voices from the courtyard echoed faintly, but inside the examination room the silence grew heavier. The doctor checked his heartbeat again. Fast. He glanced toward the window where more prisoners waited in line, older men watching curiously. The doctor wrote something on the paper and sighed. The young soldier noticed and asked softly, "Am I sick?" The doctor paused before answering. "No, just tired," he said. But everyone in the room knew that word didn't explain everything. When the exam ended, the young prisoner stood slowly, almost unsure whether to leave. The guard opened the door and guided him outside. As he stepped into the cold air, conversations nearby grew quieter. Older prisoners looked at him differently, not as a rival soldier, but as someone who looked out of place in a war already ending. The morning sun climbed higher above the wire fences, and for the first time that day, the camp felt strangely silent. Something about that quiet young soldier made everyone realize one uncomfortable truth. Some of the people sent to fight had barely begun to live. By midday, the medical tent had grown warmer, the air thick with the smell of canvas, antiseptic, and damp uniforms drying near the entrance. Outside, lines of prisoners waited quietly, boots shifting in the dirt. Inside, the routine continued. Name, age, pulse, questions repeated dozens of times each day. But when the young German prisoner returned for additional evaluation, the mood changed almost immediately. The doctor noticed it first. The boy moved carefully, as if every motion required thought, not from injury, but from exhaustion that ran deeper than tired muscles. "Sit down," the doctor said gently. The young prisoner obeyed instantly, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. The doctor began with simple questions. Where were you stationed? How long since proper sleep? How many days retreating? The answers were quiet, almost mechanical. One medic wrote notes slowly, glancing up more often than usual. The boy spoke about endless movement. Trains crowded with soldiers, roads filled with civilians, nights without shelter. Not complaints, just short facts, spoken without emotion, like someone describing weather. The doctor checked his pulse again. Still fast. He frowned. The guards near the entrance stopped talking, listening without meaning to. The doctor asked him to stand and breathe deeply while he examined his chest. For a moment, the young soldier swayed slightly. A medic stepped forward, but the boy quickly corrected himself, embarrassed. "I'm fine," he whispered. No one replied. The doctor exchanged a look with his assistant, a silent conversation that didn't need words. He had seen this before. Not wounds, not illness, something quieter, the weight of too much too soon. Outside, wind pushed against the tent walls, making the canvas ripple softly. The sounds of the camp faded behind the thick fabric, leaving only the scratch of a pen and the calm voice of the doctor. "You're safe here," the doctor said finally, almost casually. The young prisoner looked up for the first time. There was confusion in his eyes, as if he didn't quite understand what safety meant anymore. The doctor wrote several notes on the form, then set the pen down slower than usual. One of the American guards removed his gloves and leaned against the wall, watching silently. The atmosphere inside the room shifted. This was no longer just an examination. It felt like a quiet realization spreading from person to person. The war had pushed boys into places meant for hardened men, and now, in this quiet medical tent, even the people responsible for processing prisoners felt the weight of that truth. When the examination ended, the young soldier hesitated before standing, as if unsure whether he was dismissed. The doctor nodded. "You should rest," he said. The boy gave a small, almost formal nod in return and stepped toward the exit. As he passed the guards, no one rushed him. No one spoke. Outside, the camp noises returned. Distant voices, clanging metal, footsteps. But inside the tent, the silence lingered long after he left. The doctor stared at the paperwork for a moment longer. Then he quietly said, "He's 80. But he looks much older inside." No one argued. The afternoon passed slowly. Clouds moved across the sky, casting long shadows between the barracks and the fences. The camp followed its usual rhythm. Meal lines, guards rotating posts, distant voices blending into the background noise of routine. But something felt different. The young prisoner sat alone near the edge of the yard, a metal cup warming his hands. He wasn't separated from the others. He simply chose the quietest place, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the barbed wire. Several older POWs watched him discreetly. They didn't approach. Some of them understood without asking questions. Inside the medical tent, the doctor finished his reports. The notes about the young soldier stayed at the top of the stack longer than the rest. Severe exhaustion, nervous strain, needs rest. Simple words that didn't fully explain what everyone had sensed. The camp commander stepped inside. "How bad?" he asked quietly. The doctor hesitated before answering. "It's not about injuries," he said. "He's just worn down, too young to carry what he's already seen." The commander nodded slowly. He walked outside and looked across the yard. The young soldier was still sitting alone, shoulders slightly hunched, as if expecting someone to call him back at any moment. A few American guards noticed him too. Normally, there was distance between guards and prisoners. Rules were rules. But today, conversation came quieter, movements slower. One guard walked past and paused briefly. He didn't say much, just a small nod. The young prisoner looked surprised, then returned the gesture awkwardly, almost unsure how to react. At dinner, the atmosphere felt calm, unusually calm. Metal trays clinked softly. Conversations were low. Even the usual arguments between prisoners seemed absent. Word had spread without anyone clearly explaining why. Not rumors, just awareness. Some of the men around him had been fighting for years, hardened by experience. Yet, seeing someone barely older than a boy sitting silently at the table made the reality of the war feel heavier than any story they could tell. One older prisoner slid a piece of bread toward him without speaking. The young soldier hesitated, then accepted it quietly. No one commented. Across the room, an American medic watched for a moment before turning away, pretending not to notice. Outside, evening light faded, turning the camp into soft silhouettes. The noise slowly died down as night approached. For the first time in many days, the young prisoner leaned back against the wooden wall and closed his eyes, not out of fear, but exhaustion finally catching up. The guards continued their patrols, boots crunching against gravel, but even they walked softer than usual. Later, as darkness settled over the camp, the doctor stood near the doorway of the medical tent and listened. No shouting, no tension, just quiet. He realized something then. The examination hadn't shocked people because of what they saw physically. It was the reminder that wars weren't only fought by hardened soldiers. Sometimes, they were fought by boys who had grown old too quickly. And that realization stayed with the camp long after the lights went out. The silence that night felt different. Not empty, just heavy. As if everyone, guards and prisoners alike, understood something without needing to say it aloud. And under the dim lights of the camp, the young soldier finally slept.